Have you ever heard the saying, opportunity only knocks once, but temptation leans against the doorbell? You heard that, yeah, and sometimes it seems to be that case. Well, I got to thinking about that. What's the difference between an opportunity and a temptation? It seems like opportunity has a positive connotation, an opportunity for something good, where it's temptation to something bad. But you think about it, every opportunity is a temptation. Because you're always faced with that choice. If it's just an opportunity, that means that there is something I need to do, and so there's a part of me that's tempted not to do it. And every temptation is an opportunity to resist, to do the right thing, the best thing. And I guess the difference would be the consequences, the results in either of those cases. Well, we're going to be in Mark chapter 6 today, and just to give the context, and that is so absolutely important, it's going to come into play. Everything we've seen up to this point even plays a key role in understanding this passage we're looking at. And that specifically is this distinction between a focus on the spiritual or a focus on the physical. We've seen that from the very beginning of Mark all the way through. We've also, as we've gone through recently, we've seen this idea of the choice we have when we hear the Word. I can choose how to respond to that. We've talked about faith and living out that faith consistently. If I believe something, then I should live according to it, consistently with it. And then the immediate context, you had the people of Nazareth who didn't do that. You know, they say, here's Jesus, he has great wisdom, he does great miracles. We're not going to listen to him because we know him. And it just made no sense. It wasn't consistent with what they said and believed. And then right before this, Jesus sent out his disciples. We looked at that. We're going to see next week when they return. And so this is sort of sandwiched in between, and Mark does that oftentimes. And what I'm talking about is we're going to look at today at the story of John the Baptist's death. And when I put it that way, you might think, well, the main character of that story then is who? John the Baptist. But he's not. And this is where it helps to understand literature. The Bible, the good book, is a good book. It's literature, and in literature, the main character of any story is the person who makes choices. The person who is faced with choices and makes decisions one way or the other. And in this story we're looking at, John the Baptist, after he's in jail, he has no choice at all. It's Herod who makes all the choices. And so he's the one that we're going to learn the lessons from. He's the reason this passage is here. Some people will say, well, they want us to know what happened to John, and okay, but the reason, the literary reason that God wanted this here is so that we can learn a lesson from Herod, so that we can benefit from what he does, or in this case, doesn't do. So the question that's going to guide us as we look at this, so you look on your handout, either we pay the cost of living consistently with what we know and believe, or we pay the cost of not doing that. One way or the other, there is going to be a cost. We're going to be faced, and this is where it is, we're going to be faced with the opportunity or the temptation, whichever way you look at it. Those choices, they're an opportunity to do the right thing and live for God consistently with what we say we believe, or a temptation not to. Both the cases. And we are going to face these in life. We're going to face them all the time. We're going to face small ones throughout the day. We're going to face major ones at times where I come to this place. Will I live consistently with what I believe in? I look at the cost and my God, if I do that, here's what the result. We need to realize, well, if I don't do it, here's the result. There's going to be a cost either way, and we have to make a choice. So let's look at this. Mark chapter 6, verse 14. Says King Herod heard of it, and literally it just says King Herod heard, and what it seems he heard of was Jesus and everything that had been happening, because it says, for Jesus' name had become known. Some said John the Baptist had been raised from the dead. That is why these miraculous powers are at work in him. So it's giving us some little foreshadowing there to let us know John is dead. But others said he is Elijah, and the Old Testament did say Elijah would precede the Messiah, but Jesus made that clear in another place. John the Baptist fulfilled that role. It wasn't literally Elijah, it was John the Baptist. Others said he is a prophet like one of the prophets of old, but when Herod heard of it, he said, John, whom I beheaded, has been raised. And so that sets us on to this journey here. I mean, think about that. Again, the Bible's the Bible, but that's great writing. He's just introducing this idea, John, whom I beheaded, has been raised. And you just imagine what he's thinking there as he sees Jesus. And that idea, however it came, that he's been brought back to life, here's Herod, like, uh-oh. That's what I get that sense there. 17, it goes on to explain, for it was Herod who had sent and seized John and bound him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because he had married her. For John had been saying to Herod, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. And Herodias had a grudge against him and wanted to put him to death. But she could not, for Herod feared John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man, and he kept him safe. When he heard him, he was greatly perplexed, and yet he heard him gladly. And so you see what set up this situation here. Herod had married his brother Philip's wife. And this Herod here is the son of the King Herod we know from the birth of Jesus and Bethlehem. And so this is his son. And Herod was a messed up guy, and it passed it on. And so you got this messed up family where Herod's brother's wife, the two of them hook up and, divorce their spouses and marry each other. And John the Baptist says, you shouldn't do that. And it really wouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. It doesn't seem, from Herod's reaction, you sort of get he knew. Like, okay, I'm going to do it, but yeah, I understand where you're coming from. But his wife Herodias, she couldn't handle that. She wouldn't accept that John would rebuke them for what they had done. And so because of that, Herod has John seized and bound and put in prison because it's what his wife wanted. Well, she wanted even more. She wanted to have him killed, but Herod wouldn't do that. It says he feared John, knowing that he was a righteous and holy man. Well, he didn't fear John. There had to be something. Whatever Herod's belief in God was, that's what he was afraid of, to kill a righteous and holy man. He wouldn't be afraid of John himself. Not like he's more powerful. It's not like his disciples are going to, revolt against me and I'm in jeopardy. So there was an element there of whatever his conception was of God. He feared God there. So he kept him safe. And then when he heard him, he was greatly perplexed. And we don't know. That one translation has puzzled. Literally, it's at a loss. Why was he perplexed? We're not sure. It doesn't tell us. What was it about what John was saying that Herod couldn't reconcile, or that Herod just had to keep coming back? Because it says, yet he heard him gladly. He liked to hear him. He liked to have John, brought up from the prison, talk to me. Even though whenever it came up, John would let him know what you did with your brother's wife. That's wrong, but he still did it. And so, again, that sets up things. Verse 21, but an opportunity came when Herod on his birthday gave a banquet for his nobles and military commanders and the leading men of Galilee. For when Herodias' daughter came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his guests. And the king said to the girl, ask me for whatever you wish, and I will give it to you. And he vowed to her, whatever you ask me, I will give you up to half my kingdom. And it seems like that was more of an expression. Like, you name it, you can have it. He wasn't going to give her half the kingdom, but he was saying, hey, just about, the sky's the limit here. And she went out and said to her mother, for what should I ask? And she said, the head of John the Baptist. And she came in immediately with haste to the king and asked, saying, I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter. And the king was exceedingly sorry, but because of his oaths and his guests, he did not want to break his word to her. And immediately the king sent an executioner with orders to bring John's head. See that word immediately that comes up all throughout Mark. He's writing to primarily this Roman audience. This just loves action. And so immediately, over and over. So he sent to bring John's head. He went and beheaded him in prison and brought his head on a platter and gave it to the girl, and the girl gave it to her mother. When the disciples heard of it, they came and took his body and laid it in a tomb. Well, you look at this, and there's a lot of lessons we could learn from this. You see Herod's pride, being, in charge of this area, and here's his banquet, and then you see his rash vow, anything you want, I'll give it to you. You see the vengeance on Herodias' part. Put a man to death. Have him beheaded because you don't like what he says about you. And then you see this idea of choices and consequences. But the point here, as we look at it, as we're going through the book of Mark, and so we're not just looking, okay, I need a passage that talks about rashness. This would be a good one. I want to know, what is the foundational message of this passage? What are the thoughts here that God wants us to get in the overall lesson? And certainly, one idea that comes to mind is the difference between good intentions and actions. You look at Herod here, and he had good intentions. Specifically to keep John the Baptist safe. It tells us that. But then you look at his actions, and they don't always line up. They're not always consistent with that good intention. If you really wanted to keep him safe, well, why arrest him and put him in prison? Why keep him there? And then certainly, why kill him if you want to keep him safe? And we see the why, but again, his actions aren't consistent with his intentions, and we probably all heard the phrase, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And, that's not just talking about our eternal fate, though it can be. It's just the idea in general of I can intend all sorts of good things, but if I don't follow through on them, there's a negative consequence. There's a negative result. I have to follow through. My actions have to match those intentions there. That's true in general. Whatever, you can think about life. I always bring up diet and exercise. Yeah, I'm going to exercise. Oh, if I don't do it, I've still got the negative result of I'm not in shape. I've got to follow through. I've got to act. It's also true spiritually. I can have all sorts of good intentions about specific things like reading my Bible or praying or encouraging someone or just in general growing, maturing, being close to God. But what do I do? Every year, I got this, I just started a couple years ago, but heard it in a video I had watched, and it made a lot of sense. Like, pick a word for the year to focus on. And that word is what you try to. And the first year was discipline. I'm going to try just to begin to get better in that area. And this year's word is focus. And they sort of overlap. The one sort of leads to the other. And there's times where I do well with following through on my intention to focus, on the task, on what I need to be doing versus getting distracted with either smaller tasks or Facebook, all kinds of things that don't even contribute at all. And there's times I do very well with that focus, and there's times I don't. There's times I follow through on my intention, and times I don't. And it certainly helps when I do. But just having that word, it's on my journal, so I see it every morning. There it is. That's my intention. But what do I do? That's what really counts there. And as Christians, I look at this and I believe we can take it deeper into something we've been seeing, a theme that's been coming up in Mark, this idea of belief versus faith. Because you think about it, they sort of correspond. My intentions versus my actions. What I believe versus do I act consistently with that? Do I really trust in what I believe? Do I live it out? Herod believed John was apparently, from what we get, a representative of God, a man of God, and believed because of that I should keep him safe. But what did he do? He didn't trust in that when he was faced with this really difficult, the decision at first to arrest him or not, certainly the decision to put him to death. He didn't trust in what he believed, didn't live it out. He didn't show that faith. And we've said that unfortunately, these words shouldn't be separated. Belief and faith, it's the same word in the Greek. It's the same word. I believe it, so I should act accordingly. It's James who, and not that it's some new thing, he noticed, but James makes the distinction because there's one word for belief and faith in the Greek, but there's also one word for the verb form, and there's no verb form of faith. So you've got to translate it believe, not faithing or something like that. And so James uses that to show the distinction between believing in our mind only versus acting in accordance with it. And that's why he says even the demons believe. He doesn't say the demons have faith. And he makes that point to get us to see they should be the same, but often they're not. I believe something in my mind, but I don't live it out. And that's really what was happening here with Herod, but it's what can happen with us as well. We're at this point that, oh yes, I believe in God. Oh yes, I believe I should read my Bible. Oh yes, I believe I should encourage. Oh yes, I believe I should put this person first. What do I do? Now, I thought about it, one good test. If someone had to guess what you believe based on your actions, what would they say? And again, not just in the spiritual realm. Think about the physical realm. They look at you and say, do I believe exercise is important? Well, if they saw how much I exercised or didn't, especially the past few weeks, they said, no, he doesn't believe it's important. I do believe it. I haven't done it. So they'd be totally right, saying, you must not believe it. Same thing with other aspects of our life, and as we think about physical or spiritual aspects. If someone were to guess based on what they could see about you, do you believe reading the Bible is important? Do you believe prayer is important? Do you believe coming to church is important? Do you believe encouraging other Christians is important? Do you believe not gossiping is important? All those things you could look, what would they say? And you could protest all day. Oh, I believe. Like, don't see it. And it's supposed to be the same. If I believe it, I should act accordingly. That faith, that's what faith is. And so if I don't, again, I'm sort of at the level with the demons. The demons believe reading the Bible, is a good thing in some sense of that word. They don't do it. They're in a little different situation, but still, I'd rather not be grouped with them. And so there's that question there. And it's not just a what-if question. Well, what if you're ever faced with a chance to find out if you'll live out what you believe? No, it's a win. You're going to be faced with the chances all the time. You're going to have, as we see here, opportunities. This is the word that stuck out to me, sort of the wait a minute verse. Verse 21, it says, "But an opportunity came when Herod on his birthday gave a banquet for his nobles and military commanders and the leading men of Galilee." And reading through that and knowing what's about to happen, and that's why I always say it's a good thing to read through the whole passage once so you know what's coming. And then this verse, that word stands out. An opportunity for who? Certainly not John the Baptist. He wouldn't say, well, what an opportunity this was. No. I mean, you think about it, an opportunity for who and what? Well, mainly for Herodias, I guess, would be her opportunity to get what she wanted. She wanted to have him killed, but Herod wanted him safe, so it's an opportunity for her. But at the same time, it's an opportunity for Herod to do the right thing, temptation to do the wrong thing. It was a temptation for Herodias too, and boy, she gave right into that one. All right, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to try to get him killed. So it was an opportunity for both of them. And it shows. Here's Herod. What did he intend? What did he believe? John is a righteous man, a representative of God. What did he sort of intend and want? I want to keep him safe. But what's he do? That's what counts. It didn't matter much to John when the axe was coming down on his head. Well, I know Herod believes I'm a godly man and I should be kept safe. I know Herod intended to keep me safe. Well, Herod's the one that gave the order to have your head cut off. Didn't matter what he believed. Didn't matter what he intended. Well, the same thing with us. We are going to have many and major opportunities, and every one of them is a temptation. Again, throughout the day we'll have many, and at times in our life we'll have major. I've got to make this choice. Do I live out what I say I believe and what to some degree I intend and desire, or not? Do I live it out? Do I act on those intentions? Do I complete my faith? James 2:22. Great verse as we've been talking about this idea. It says, you see that faith was active along with his works, and faith was completed by his works. It's talking about Abram when he was tested by God to sacrifice Isaac. And what is it that showed his faith was completed? In other words, I believe in God. I believe there is a God. I believe that he is best, that he's all wise, that he knows best. I believe that he wants my best. I believe because he's told me he wants to have a lineage from me, and specifically from my son with Sarah, and now he's telling me to kill Isaac. I believe all that. It says his faith was made complete when he acted on it. Because belief isn't complete in and of itself. And just believing in our mind, it's when we act on it that it's completely what it should be. It was true for Abraham, it's true for us. We can say, I believe all day long. But all day long, we're faced with opportunities to show, do I truly believe? Do I truly have faith? And not faith that Oh, I do this. Oh, I'll do it because I know I'll get the best. I know I'll get what I want. I know it'll all work out just great right here, right now. That's faith that. The Bible doesn't talk about faith that unless God has told us that. Bible talks about faith in. I have faith in God. This is the best thing to do because God is God and He said so, not because it'll get me what I want right away or help me escape trouble right now. No. But I'm going to do it because I truly believe it. My faith is completed when I do it. Well, what will determine when we're faced with those choices? Here I am, I believe this. I'm faced with this choice to either act in accordance with that belief or not. I can see some difficulties, some things that will arise if I act in accordance with it. Part of me that says that, boy, life would be a little easier if I didn't. What do I do? Well, what determines that? Often you hear me talk about our mind, our heart, and our will. Our mind is what I believe. My heart then is what I intend, what I desire, and my will is what I do. And you probably heard me say that we don't always act true to our heart. That I believe something and I want something, and sometimes I'll do that and other times I won't, but we don't always act true to our heart. And as I read this passage, and I tell you, sitting there this morning, I'm thinking this might even be a mainer idea than the main idea, is this idea that we always do act in accordance with our true heart. We always do the things that we want to do. Now, it might sound different there because, again, there's times I say I want to do this and I don't. But I think it is. And I think the key to this, it's this underlying focus of the spiritual or the physical. And I said last week, I believe, that think of these two, spiritual and physical. We've been talking about this whole time in Mark. We'll continue to talk about it. Think about those as headings of two columns. And you have the spiritual and the physical. And under the spiritual, you have all these other distinctions. You have God versus me. God, obviously, if I have a spiritual focus, my focus is on God. If I have a physical focus, it's on me and myself and can be very selfish. If I have the spiritual focus, I'm thinking of eternal things. I'm looking at the eternal picture. If I have a physical focus, I'm looking at the right now. If I have a spiritual focus, and then I've got this idea of being surrendered to God. Remember we saw that, the fear of the Lord, and I can either accept it and surrender to Him, or the physical side of it is I can retreat and say, no, God, I know who you are and what that requires of me, and so I don't want to get close to you. I don't want to follow through on it. And certainly as we think of the spiritual versus the physical, you have faith and sight. Where's faith go? The spiritual, and sight on the physical. They all go together, and we need to think of it that way. And so you look at Herod, he had some level of belief. I believe John is a representative of God, and he had some degree of intention, desire. I want to keep John safe, but foundationally, which focus did he have? Physical or spiritual? Physical, yeah. I'm thinking about right now, oops, that physical I've been putting over here, hadn't I? I've been thinking about right now. I've been thinking of me and what it might cost me, what I can see, versus God and what's best in His will. And that's what he acts out of. And so the same thing for us. I think that, we can say I believe, and even I intend, I desire, and I want this, but when it comes down to our choice or our action, it's built on our true heart. And that is our foundational focus. It really is. I'm starting to think there aren't times where I act in opposition to my heart. There's times where my heart is just really tested and times it's not. There's times where, Herod was willing to stand up to his wife and say, no, I'm not going to kill him, even though she wanted him to. He had enough heart to do that, but when it came then to he made that promise in front of everyone, his heart wasn't strong enough. He wasn't committed enough to the spiritual side of things. Like, I can handle her opposition, whatever, but no, I can't stand up now I made this oath in front of people. I'm not willing to go that far. I don't have that much of a spiritual focus. The example that I often use, and someone called me on it recently, I talk about, I know in my mind what is a healthy lifestyle as far as exercise and diet. And, and I say I want to be healthy. Well, they said, and I posted on Facebook, hey, stopped at this great ice cream place. I'm like, Okay, you say this and you do that. And you know what? I realized I don't want to eat healthy. I want to eat healthy comfortably. And part of that is, again, based on what I know. I'm not extremely overweight. I'm not, like, as far as I know, in danger of a heart attack at any minute if I don't lose 20 pounds. I'd just like to, because I got some jeans I can't button the button on, and you don't see it because I've got a belt and the shirt, but there's some jeans. Matter of fact, I had a pair I was going to wear this morning. Like, nope, not those right now. Until I've been dieting a little more comfortably. But there's that part. My heart doesn't just want to diet. That's not my intention. It's to diet comfortably, which means, okay, in general, I'm going to avoid these things and follow this plan that Lisa and I found. But if there's anything special, like this weekend, it's the parent weekend with my daughter, and we're like, that's a holiday. Yep, so we've been eating whatever we want all weekend. It's a holiday, and we take holidays off. That's what I want. And so I do act in accordance with my heart all the time. And so I do. There's times where I'd like to have the Oreo, I'd like to have this, and I don't, because in general, I want to lose weight. But not so much that I never have those things. So I begin to think about it. I think we all act in accordance with our heart. It's just my heart's at this sort of level of commitment. Like, I can put up with this much, but not that much, God. Come on. Or I don't see something, I don't realize something. You know, I had something else this week on the spiritual side, that's something I struggle with a lot. And I said to God, like, God, this thing I really want that gets me in trouble, like, God, I take that want away. I really wish it wasn't there. So I never struggled with this again. It never was a temptation. I take it away. It didn't go away. And God, why not? And that with this made me realize where my heart was. My heart wasn't really on the focus on the spiritual side. You know, it was more on the physical. I want what I want. And there's part of me that just wishes you'd take the whole temptation away, but the reason for the temptation is I want what I want more than I want what God wants. I want something for me more than I want, in this case, something for someone else. For Lisa, to put her first. And it was a big aha moment. That's what's causing this. Because in general, if you'd asked me, I'd say, well, of course I want to show love to Lisa. Of course I want to put her first. Yeah, but here, God, here's how this works. And in my mind, I rationalized I got that exception. And it's finally struck me for the first time. I'm doing what I want every time I get, angry about this certain thing. Because I think my physical, selfish thing that I want is more important than my commitment I made to unselfishly love her. And goes on this side because that follows God's will. And it struck me really for the first time. It was like, if you truly want to change, you got to change that heart thing. You're never going to change the action if you don't change the heart. And that heart started, is changing because my mind finally realized the truth. It finally understood this whole time I've been making an excuse for what I want. Thinking, okay, I've been focused on this physical thing. So yeah, I am pretty selfless for her and everything else till it comes to this, and they come to a head and butt up and like, no, shouldn't have to, this, that. So that's under there somewhere. As we look at this spiritual focus, as we look at, do I follow through? If there's something you've been struggling with for a long time, step back and look. Ask someone if you need to. Ask God, provide wisdom, whether it's through His Word, the situation you can understand through another person, that growth triangle. Ask God, show me what it is that's at the root of this, that's in my heart, that I am doing what I truly want. I just haven't recognized it because I had deceived myself into thinking, I want to always be kind to my wife. I want to always put her first. No, I don't. Not in that situation I didn't. I just didn't know it. The Bible talks about sin being deceptive. That's what it is. That's what it's talking about. That's why we have to renew our mind. I was beating my head against a wall until I stood back and realized, I've been doing what I want the whole time, even though part of me thought, I want to not, give in to this temptation to be angry over this certain thing. That makes sense? I really think that's at the key of this passage here. Now, the next point is definitely true. Well, let me say one thing. This came to mind as I thought that. So we'll throw this in for free. What about when Paul says, the good that I want to do, I don't do? He says, I want. Well, look what it says. Romans 7:19. The good that I want, I do not do, but I practice the very evil that I do not want. So he says, I want to do it, I don't want to do it. Well, I think you look at the whole context here. Verse 18 says, "For I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is in my flesh," that part of us that's still inclined to live for ourself versus God, live for the physical versus the spiritual. "For the willing is present in me, but the doing of the good is not." And I'm quoting from the New American Standard, and the reason is, and I'll pick on the ESV, I picked on the NIV in Sunday school, I'm going to pick on it again here. The NIV says, "For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. I'm not able to." ESV says the same thing, "For I have the desire to do what is right, but not the ability." Literally, it just says what the New American Standard says. "For the good that I want, I do not do." Oops, wrong verse there. "For the willing is present in me, but the doing of the good is not." It's not that it cannot be, it just is not. I'm faced with this situation. I'd like to do the right thing. I don't do the right thing. It's not that I absolutely can't. We always have a choice. That, again, you take a less clear verse in light of clear passages. Clear passages say there's no temptation we've ever faced that we can't. Should have added that verse there. That we can't resist. So it's not that I can't do it, but it's just, it doesn't happen. And he says in verse 20, "But if I am doing the very thing I do not want, I'm no longer the one doing it, but sin which dwells in me." And he's not passing the buck saying, "Oh, not my fault, it's that sin." No, he's saying that part of me that's still focused on me. That flesh part of me, I'm doing that. It's sin that's doing it, yeah, but it's me that's choosing, that still has that sinful desire present. I haven't examined my heart enough to realize it's still there. There's still some part of me that really wants to do wrong. The me who's made this commitment to Christ, I don't want to, but that sin part of me that's still left, it wants to. And I haven't done enough to understand it and to work against it, to feed the good versus the bad. I think this is really key. If there's a sin you've been struggling with, you need to step back and see, what is it I truly want that's causing me to choose that? That's what Herod was. There's a big part of him that didn't want to have John killed. But when it came to the choice, there was a bigger part of him that didn't want to break his oath in front of those people. Isn't that true? Isn't that what happened? And then the last thing is, there will be a cost either way. For Herod, there would have been a definite cost not to arrest John or to release him, right? What would that cost have been? His wife didn't like John, so Herod arrested him. Why is that? Well, we've all heard the phrase, haven't we? Happy wife, happy life. Apparently it even applies to kings. King Herod here, he wasn't literally a king. The only literal king was his father, but he had the same basic authority, so he was called king. Even kings live the same way. Happy wife, happy life. Okay, honey, I'll arrest John. But he drew the line at first to killing him. But then, that cost of breaking his oath, somehow that one was different. Like the cost of, I don't want to put John to death, and I won't just because Herodias says, put him to death. But I made this oath in front of everybody, in front of all these leaders, in front of all these people. I can't back down on that. He could have. It wasn't like the law of the Medes and Persians that once you sign it, it cannot be revoked. He could have said, nope, not that. He would have been embarrassed. At least in his mind. He chose not to. That wasn't worth John's life. That wasn't worth his desire he had to keep John safe. And so there was a cost to him, though. Look at verse 25. She came in immediately with haste to the king and asked, saying, "I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter." And the king was exceedingly sorry. But again, because of his oaths and his guests, he did not want to break his word to her. Wasn't even breaking his word to her. Her mom, he knew she was behind it. It was the oath and the guest. But he was exceedingly sorry. That's the same word used in Matthew 13:34, where Jesus says to the disciples in the Garden of Gethsemane, "My soul is very sorrowful, even unto death." He knows he's about to die. How sorrowful is he? Yeah, pretty sorrowful. It's the same word used of Herod. This was not a small thing. There was a big cost to him to put John to death. But he chose that cost over the cost of breaking his oath in front of his guests. Well, it's the same thing for us. You know what? By its nature, there's a cost to act in accordance with our beliefs. In whatever way, even if it's just getting up earlier to read my Bible and pray, if it's standing up, and doing what's right at work, if it's, again, taking a stand, if it's encouraging, it's a cost just to take the time to encourage someone, to write a letter, to give them a call, to visit. And there's always a cost, but there's a cost not to, is what we need to understand. And we don't realize this. We see the cost of doing it, but we don't see the cost always of not doing what we should, of living like I say I believe. And again, the cost can be the specific thing of, if I don't get up to read my Bible and pray, well, then I am not going to get that input that I need to grow and mature. If I don't encourage one, I'm not going to get, one, do what God has told me to do, and two, see the benefit to helping them. Whatever it is, there's also a cost of not following through. And the key cost, if I believe it, but I don't act upon it, if I don't have true faith, if my faith isn't made complete, the true cost is that's the essence of our Christian relationship with God. We talked about this in Sunday school. It's not doing what's right and not doing what's wrong. That's like Christianity 101. Jesus says that's what to be expected of a servant. It's faith that is what God's really looking for in this relationship. And so if I don't live in accordance with what I believe, and especially trusting Him in those times where I just can't see it, I'm not going to experience this relationship to the fullness that God wants it to. I'm not going to have the abundant life that Jesus says I came to bring. That's crucial to living this life that God wants. And I thought about it. Again, don't think of it as just that God's up in heaven pointing His finger. No, God's up in heaven saying, oh, please, I want you to get this. It'd be like if an aspiring basketball player had a chance to spend a week with Michael Jordan, working on his skills. Michael Jordan's my era. If you have to apply it to Kobe Bryant or whoever, I'm sure you get the point. You've got that opportunity, and then that aspiring basketball player every day says, you know what, I really don't feel like going out there on the court, Michael. No, I don't really, those shoes, don't want to put them on. Oh, I get so sweaty when we play basketball. I don't want the cost. But what's the cost of not doing that? Can you imagine if you were a real aspiring basketball player and had a chance to spend a week with Michael Jordan, and you didn't? Wouldn't that be a cost? That's us. I've got the chance to experience this relationship to the fullest. If I don't do it, there's a cost of what I'm missing out on. We need to use that. That needs to be our motivation, our why. God, I don't want to miss out on it. I am an aspiring, spiritual, maturing Christian. That's what I want to its fullest, and here's the chance to do it all the time. Am I doing it or not? And that's what God wants. As always, I think there's an underlying root problem. And what is it here? I think it's we confuse our belief with our faith. I believe in God, so I must have faith. And James says, no, just that belief in and of itself isn't faith. Yeah, it should be. It's one word, but I need to distinguish them because we're not doing it. Or we are distinguishing them, so I need to make sure we've got both of them when it should just be one in the first place. We confuse our intention and desire with our true heart. There's a part of me that wants to do this, and I've been doing this for so long. My mind, our heart, and our will. I said sometimes we don't act in accord with our heart. I think we always act in accordance with our heart. Our heart's just not as focused on the spiritual as we might think it is. We reach a limit. We reach an exception. We reach a, yeah, not that, God. Yeah, but. And so I think we do always act in accordance with our heart. And so the key to overcoming this, well, the first one is just this humble self-examination. I've got to stop back and honestly, openly, truthfully, humbly say, God, what is it about me, this thing that I keep struggling with, that part of me wishes that I didn't? What's the part of me that's keeping this alive? What's the part of my heart that wants what I want and is keeping me from living for you? And I think you can apply this across the board. Even, again, if you aren't spending time in the Word and praying, what is it you want that's keeping that from happening? You are acting in accordance with what you want every time. I am too. I know I should exercise, but there's times I just don't want to. That, again, I want to sort of exercise comfortably. I want to exercise when there's plenty of time, when I feel really good, and so that really limits the window. A lot. But I'm doing what I want. On those days I don't exercise. Well, we're doing what we want spiritually. And so I need to examine, what is it I truly want? Because I've been thinking this whole time I do want this, but it doesn't happen. Or I don't want this and it keeps happening. What is it I want? And then the second thing is, again, renew my mind and transform my heart. Okay, now that I understand it, now begin to look on. All right, I see what I truly want. I want to begin to change that, God. Help me change that so that I can change my actions. I've been trying just to change the action. Stop doing, get up and exercise, get up and exercise. Well, step back and examine my heart. What's the thing that's keeping me? What do I want that's keeping me from doing that? So what do I need to do now? Well, I would encourage you, focus on one specific area. And maybe it is physical. You know, we can learn the lessons in the physical realm, and they apply. If I could learn to discipline myself with exercise, I'd be able to discipline myself much more with other things. So whatever you pick something that you're struggling with, doing or not doing. I want to do it, but I'm not. I don't want to do it, but I do. And really examine it. You know, what would change if I fully lived out what I believe? Ask that question. What would change if I fully lived out what I believe in my mind is best, what I know to be true? And it might be worry or joy, you know, the situations. I say I trust God, but I get in here and I get all this worry. And it's not just that initial wave we talk about. It just continues. I can never get past it. What would change? You know, purpose and meaning of our relationship, this idea of this faith versus just focusing on, oh, don't do this and do this. How do I have that faithful, dynamic relationship with God? And then second, as I just said, renew my mind and transform my heart. Begin to look at things differently, understand differently. Oh, there's been this part that's been standing in the way the whole time. All right, God, I want to change that part of me. I want to want what I want. And you know what God says? You know, it's God who works in us, both to will and to act. But we've got to be aware of it. We've been praying for the wrong thing. God, just help me not do this. And God's like, well, you're doing what you want to do. I got to help you not want to do it. But at first, you got to recognize you want to do it. And you haven't up to this point. You've been thinking, oh, I just want to stop doing this thing. God says, yeah, but you really want to do this thing. We got to change your want, your will. Does that all make sense? I think this is really key. I think this passage, which a lot of people say, oh, it's just this aside, you know, oh, you're going to throw in so we know what happened to John, you know, okay, got to round out that subplot. No, this is a pretty major lesson here. And it's a lesson for all of us because the same thing, as always, as we get to this time, there's those, if we haven't made a decision to accept Christ, to whatever degree, if you're here, you want some relationship with God. But if you haven't, you know, believed, repented, and been baptized, well, then you don't truly want it because you haven't done what it takes to have it. And now's the chance. And then for those of us who've made that decision, well, the possibilities are endless. What is it I say I want? It's not happening, or I don't want, and it is happening. And so what is it I truly want? God, help me see that. Help me change that. It's my time to make that decision, if nothing else, just to say, God, help me see what it is.